Hi, and welcome back. In this episode of Flash Professional for East Tech, we're going to be learning how to use the color panel, the swatch panel, gradients, the gradient transform tool, the free transform tool. We're going to touch on rulers and guides for about 5 seconds because you already know how to use those. I'll just show you how to access them here in Flash. And we will also be getting into layers and also the library panel and how to deal with the library. So this is a few things we're going to cover. So let's go ahead and get started. We're going to draw an oval on our stage here. And we're going to pick a fill color of maybe kind of a medium green. And we're going to fill a stroke that's going to be kind of a dark green. Let's do a stroke value of about 4. Okay, so I'm going to constrain it by holding down the shift key and go ahead and draw my circle out here. There it is. As long as we're at it, we will also go ahead and stretch that out like we did before. And we're going to actually draw an avocado. And there is our outline. All right, so first thing we want to do is understand the color palette. And the colors are right up here. Let me drag this out so we can see the names as we go. As long as I'm in this, if I go ahead and select any part of this, click on color, I can actually change the color of this object just by moving around the screen. I can change how light or dark the object would be here in the panel, and I can even type in a value. This value right here is actually a hexadecimal value of the color. So if you understand and know what the hexadecimal is, you can even play around and experiment with that. While we are in this shape as well, if I had double clicked, I can also go up and change the stroke color. So we're going to go ahead and open swatches, or we could choose just from swatches by clicking on swatches. So let's go back to our dark green that we had. And let's go back to our color and select our fill. And we're going to go back to that other green that we had for the fill. Okay, so this is basically how we are able to change the fill and the color through these swatch and color panels. Now, using the gradient, understand that we don't have a gradient tool like we did in Photoshop or we had in Illustrator. But what we do have is we have the ability, if I go ahead and click on my fill again, to go up to color, and right up here where it says solid color, we could change this to gradient. So I'll go ahead and click on linear gradient. And with a linear gradient, we do have a panel that you're familiar with down here. If I double click on the little color swatch, the white one there, I can go ahead and make it a dark green. And I'll double click on this swatch and make that a light green. So now I have a gradient going across from light to dark. I have the option to go with a radial gradient and bitmap fill. We'll talk about bitmap fill later on, but right now we'll just stick with these two. And let's go ahead and minimize that screen. So we have our gradient now going left to right. Now the nice thing is that we don't have to only have this type of a gradient. We can spread the gradient out or shrink it down with a new tool we haven't seen yet called the Gradient Transform tool. It's found linked with the free transform tool. So if you look for the free transform, then come on down and go to Gradient Transform, shortcut of the letter F, by the way. And when I click on my fill, I now have these lines that will allow me to either pull them apart to smooth out the gradient. So the darkest is way over on this side. The lightest would be way over here. I could pull it together so we have anything to the right is at the darkest, anything to the left of this line is the lightest. I can move the position of where that gradient will start or end by pulling the little centerpiece back and forth here. So you pull it way over to that side. Let me go ahead and undo those changes because I kind of like that gradient where it was. We also have the option to swivel. So some of you are going to probably be creating like a skyline later on in your project you'll be doing for this episode. So if you want to have the gradient of the sky go from a darker blue to a lighter blue, you will have to spin your gradient using this gradient transform tool. Okay, so we'll leave it right there. I kind of like that look. Now let's take a look at the free transform tool. Free transform tool works identical to the free transform we had before with the other tools. I can widen pieces out, undo, undo, there we go. I can stretch them out. I can grab it by a corner and do both things with it. So, and I also have the option to swivel. The one thing that you can also do with the free transform, I go ahead and double click, we're still in free transform mode. If I hold the option key, click and drag, I can duplicate my object right on the spot. I can go ahead and pull this little thing down, and that'll change the swivel. And I can go ahead and swivel this thing over onto its side. If I click in the middle and drag, I can kind of just move it around. And now I have two avocados. Tell you what, we're going to cut this avocado in half, so I'm going to go ahead and double click, actually single click on that. I'm going to go up to my color palette, and I'm going to drag that up to kind of that yellowish, and let's make it a solid color. And let's lighten this up a little bit more and see what that looks like. That kind of looks good. So there's the inside of my avocado. And every good avocado has a pit, so let's go ahead and create a pit. Go back to my oval tool. Where's my mouse? Shift and click. We'll constrain it maybe about that big. And let's turn the inside of that avocado pit color, which would be a brown. Let's go to swatches. I have a brown right up here. And so it's more of a red. Let's go ahead and find a brown. I have a brown. Let's see, this looks like brown. That's more brown. And then I can go ahead and drag that on down. Before I do, though, I'm going to go ahead and select these pieces, and I'm going to go ahead and combine the objects to unions, and that basically means that they're going from merge drawing to object drawing. And we'll do it for all three, and I'm going to show you why in a minute why we're doing this. And now if I go ahead and click this, I can drag this down, but notice we can't see it, which means it needs to be brought to the front. There we go. So there's our pit. So now we have our two avocados. Now the problem is that when we're working in Flash, we're probably going to want these to be different layers. And if you notice down here in the lower left, there's only one layer. All of these objects are in that one layer, and they're all set up in their own stacking order. But we want to separate the layers. We want each one of these pieces as a layer. So we're going to go ahead and Command A, select everything. And if I right click in any one of these boxes, I can go down here to where it says Distribute to Layers. So now what's happening is it's now created 4 layers. And you're thinking, well, wait a minute, there's only 3 objects. That's because one of the layers is the background layer. So if I go ahead and click on these, I can figure out which one's which. Nothing really is in a bounding box. So layer 1 is our background. So I'm going to go ahead and type in BKG for background. And I click on layer 2, there's the pit. It's always a good idea to name your layers like we did when we were working in Photoshop. So I'm going to double click on where the words layer 2, and I'm going to type in pit. Layer 3 is the green avocado, so I'm going to just go green A for avocado, and layer 4 is our yellow avocado. So we've got those 4 areas. 2 of the layers we will always choose together. I'm going to always want to pick the pit and the yellow avocado at the same time. I will never really necessarily pick one over the other. So I kind of want those 2 to be grouped together. There's a couple of ways to group these. One way to group them is to go ahead and create a new folder. I'm going to call this folder Combined. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab the pit and drag that in. Grab the yellow, drag that in, and watch what happens here. Notice the pit disappeared because I dropped it in first. So I can now change the stacking order of the pit and move it up to be ahead of the yellow. So now I've got combined. So if I go ahead and just click on that folder, I can go ahead and move these around together and place them wherever I want to place them. Let's go ahead and undo those. So I have them all out of that folder now. I'm going to go ahead and click on Combined Folder, and I'm going to click on the trash can, and notice Combined disappears. The other way that we can do the same sort of thing is instead of putting those 2 items in a folder, we can put them in a new layer. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Layer, and I'll call this layer Combined. And now I'm going to go ahead and copy the yellow. So Command C to copy. But I can't just go to combine and do a Command V to paste, because that will paste to the center. What I want to do is I want to paste in place. So if I go up to edit, there's something here called paste in place. And notice it is a Shift Command V. And if I paste in place, that's going to keep the location of that yellow avocado in exactly the same position it was before. So if I go ahead and click on the pit, do a Command C, click and combine. I'm going to do a Command Shift V, and it just pasted that in place. Now I can go ahead and toss out the old pit, toss out the old yellow, and now I have a combined layer that is both pieces. A lot of you have already created images where you had trees that you used the deco brush, you had buildings where you used the deco brush. I want to kind of show you why you cannot necessarily use the distribute to layers with that old image you created. Let me go ahead and get rid of my avocados. I'm not going to save that. Open my file from yesterday, and that was in my desktop, and it's down here called Shapes. Go ahead and click open. I'm going to go ahead and view this in back to pasteboard mode. And if you notice here, I have all these trees, all these buildings. If I do a Command A, when I went to distribute to layers, what actually happened is I had over 890 layers. Because every single one of these little pieces of every little tree was its own layer. That's not going to work for us. We're going to go ahead and shut that down, go back to a new ActionScript window. Let's go ahead and do a Command 2 to get this nice and big. What we're going to do now is I'm going to show you how to start building things in the library. And let's go ahead and pick our Deco tool. And I'm going to go start with some trees. There's a tree brush. And an aspen is good enough. Let's go ahead and draw an aspen tree. Oh, let's try that again. We'll use that, and I'll draw one more, so we'll have maybe two. There we go. Okay, the first one we don't really want, and select all of that one and just delete it. Now, this first tree, I'm going to go ahead and highlight the whole tree. Notice it's all selected. I'm going to go up to Modify, and I'm going to convert this to a symbol. And notice what happens. I'm going to call this Tree 1. Okay. And it now has become a symbol. And if I click up here into my library, this tree is now in my library. That's Tree 1. I'll go ahead and select the other tree. And I can either, once again, go up here and convert to symbol, or I can even, after I've selected, I can right-click and convert to symbol there at the bottom. Call this Tree 2. Always a good idea to learn some shortcuts. And now Tree 2 shows up in my library. So if I were just to delete these for now, I can actually go up here and grab that tree, drag it over to my stage, let go, and I can start to create my forest of trees and bring in a couple of the other tree. And I now can start populating my area with trees. I can do a Command C on one of the trees and do a Command V to paste. I can populate it that way as well. So there's a number of ways that I can start bringing those trees in. Now if I do select them all, they're all individual trees, and now I can actually go to distribute to layers, and what's going to pop up here now is going to be 5 more layers, all as their separate layers. So that actually allows me to separate them without having hundreds of little locations. The other thing I'd like to bring up, as promised, rulers and guides. If I go up under my view window, I can go ahead and click on rulers. Notice ruler is not Command R like we had in the past, but it's actually Option Shift Command R. That brings up the rulers. And in order to get a guide, all I need to do is grab within the ruler as before and pull the guides out. All right, so that's basically the lesson for today. So what you're going to need to do is create an image. The image you're going to create is going to be some sort of a background. You can have mountains, trees, buildings. I'd like you to pull your sprite in from before. And what you're also going to be doing with that is I want to make sure I see gradients. I want to see that layers are used. I also want to see the library populated with a number of objects. Next class, I will also explain how you can import your library in from a previous project. So once you populate this library, you will be able to use it in other projects. So that's it for now. We'll see you in the next lesson.